So it's change the subject of the formula. So in this topic, we have 9 different equations that is showing us or teaching us how to look for a subject. For example, if we start off our first one, we will have something like 2y minus 3x is equals to 4. And then they'll ask you to say, make y the subject of the formula. Right. So what you need to do first is to make sure that you remove anything that does not have y on it to the other side, because here we are looking for y, so which means we are looking at 2y. So we need to be able to find or solve or simplify this equation whereby y becomes our subject to the formula. So first things first, what you do is you move this 3x to the right side so that you be left with 2y is equal to 4. And remember, when you are moving a negative number to the other side, it becomes a positive. And when you're moving a negative number to the other side, it becomes a negative. So which means on this one, the minus 3x becomes plus 3x. But then we need to make y the subject of the formula. How do we get rid of the 2? To get rid of the 2, what you do is you divide by 2 on both sides so that the 2 be cancelled. And then you have y is equals to, and then you can simplify it as saying, we know 2 into 2 is 1 and 2 into 4 is 2. So you'll be left with 2 plus 3x over 2. Do we all understand this one? We all understand this one. So this is the first part that we have to deal with. We need to be able to simplify on how do we move a number to the other side so that we can look for the variable that they told us to look to make the subject of the formula. So this is your first step. This is your first equation on how to change the subject of the formula. And then the second one, let me just clear this. The second one, you can have something like y minus mx minus c is equal to 0. And then they say make y the subject of the formula. So it is the same concept, same principle. So which means when you are looking at this, basically a 0, it means that there's nothing. And you already see that our y is a positive. So you say y is equal to, you move all this to the other side. So you have mx plus c. You understand this one?
Yes.
Right. So this is your second equation. If ever they're asking you to look for y and they give you something like this, that's how you calculate it. All right, let us move to the third one. On the third one, they can give you something like a square root of a is equals to b. And then they say make a the subject of the formula. So from this, we already know from our basic principle that a square root basically means that there's a what? There's an invisible 2 here, right? So how do we get rid of this square root? You will square root both sides. You put the power of the 2 on both sides, because this 2 will cancel with this square root here. So you have A is equal to B squared. Whenever you're dealing with the square root, what you do is you multiply both sides with the power of 2 so that you can get rid of the square root. Once you get rid of the square root, your equation becomes easy to calculate. Do you have any questions?
Can you re-explain?
All right, no problem. Okay, so on our third one, we have something like this. Square root of A is equals to B. And then they say make A the subject of the formula. So when you're dealing with a square root, we are simply saying that there is an invisible 2 right here. So that's the square root. So in order for you to get A by itself, we need to remove this square root. And how do we remove the square root? We will power both sides to the power of 2. Why? So that we can get rid of this square root. Because this power of the 2, we will cancel this square root and we'll be left with A is equal to our B squared, which is simply saying A is equals to B squared.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yes.
All right. So this is our third equation on how to change the subject to the formula. So these are the most questions that they can ask you, and this is how you find the subject. And then moving forward, our number 4. On number 4, they can give you something like A, B minus C is equals to D. And then they say make A the subject of the formula. Right. And we know the first things first, we need to move anything that is not A to the other side. Remember our first step, which you have A, B is equal to C plus D. Are we together so far?
Yes.
All right. So after that, how do you think we can get to have A this side? How can you make A the subject of the formula when we're at this stage?
Multiply by
Okay. So to get A, you divide both sides by B, so that this B will be cancelled, and you have equation being A is equal to C plus plus D, over B. Or you can also write it as A is equals to CB plus D, one and the same thing. Okay. So for the others that joined, we are dealing with this changing of the subject with the formula, where we had our first equation, 2y minus 3x is equals to 4, where they asked us to make y the subject of the formula. So what you do is, okay, just wait for him so I can catch up. Okay. So we are dealing with changing the subject of the formula, whereby we have 9 different equations on how to change the subject of the formula. So our first one was 2y minus 3x is equal to 4, where we needed to make y the subject of the formula. So we said the first things first, you need to move anything that is not dealing with y to the other side. So you have 2y is equal to when a -3 moves to the other side, it becomes a positive. So you have 4 plus 3x. So in order for you to make y the subject of the formula, you have to divide both sides by 2, and then that cancels that. And then you have y is equal to 2 will cancel 4, which is 2 times, which it will be 2 plus 3x over 2. So this was our first step. And then our second one was y minus mx minus c is equals to 0. And they asked you to change y to the subject of the formula. So it's the same thing. Anything that is not relating to y, you move it to the other side. So you have y is equals to mx plus c. And then this becomes the final answer. Our third one, where we had square root of a is equals to b, and they said we should make a the subject of the formula, where in order for us to get rid of the square root, we need to power both sides by 2, because there there's an invisible 2. So when you power both sides by 2, we are simply cutting off the square root, where you'll be left with a is equals to b to the power of 2, which is the same as a is equals to b to the power of 2. So this was our third step. And then our fourth one, we had ab minus c is equals to d. And then they asked us to make a the subject of the formula. So things first, we need to move this c to the other side. And this is what we did. We got c plus d because positive. And then after that, when we have ab is equals to c plus d. In order for you to find or make a the subject of the formula, you need to divide both sides by b, whereby this b will cancel that, and then we have a is equals to c plus d over b, or you can say a is equals to c over b plus d over b. So these are the 4 steps that we have covered so far. And are there any questions? Are there any questions?
No question.
Okay. So let us proceed to the fifth one. Okay. When you're dealing with the fifth step, you can have something like x plus y over z is equals to t. And then they say make y the subject of the formula. So on the fifth step now, if ever you are given an equation and it has a fraction, you first need to get rid of the fraction so that you'll be able to find your subject. So the question becomes, how do you get rid of the fraction? So we need to get rid of this z. To get rid of this z, what you simply do is you multiply both sides by z. So when you multiply this z by this side, it's simply canceling this z over here. And then you have your x plus y is equals to tz. So when it's like this, it becomes easy. We have our positive y, so which means we need to move the x to the other side because we don't need it. So by moving this x to the other side, it becomes a negative. And then here you are left with a positive y is equals to tz minus x. And then this becomes your final answer. Are there any questions?
No.
Okay, so no questions. The sixth one is the same as your fifth one. So we are basically, you can see that from the first one, what we are learning is how do you shift a fraction or a variable to the other side for you to find the subject of the formula. And then from the second one, it was still the same concept. So now they're just adding up things bit by bit, whereby on our number 5 now, we are dealing with a fraction. So they want to see, let's say if you have a fraction, how do you find the subject of the formula? And also, if they give you a fraction and a square root, how are you going to simplify the equation? So on our 6th one, we are dealing with both a fraction and a square root. So we have a plus b over t is equals to s. So you can see this is the same concept. We follow the same principles. Wherever you are given an equation and they're asking you to change it to change a certain variable to the subject of the formula. If you have a fraction, you first need to get rid of the fraction before you calculate anything else. So having this equation, what you need to do is get rid of the fraction. And by getting rid of the fraction, we are getting rid of the t. So to get rid of the t, you multiply both sides by t, at which this t will cancel this one. And then you have square root of a plus b is equal to st, right? And if you can remember our third equation that we did where we had a square root, how do we get rid of the square root? How do you think we get rid of the square root? Okay, so to get rid of the square root, we said you multiply both sides. Sorry, yes, sir?
I think we're gonna multiply both sides by the squared. We put them in brackets and then we say squared. Both sides.
That is correct. So that's correct. So when you multiply both sides by the squared, you are simply cancelling this square root. And then you have a plus b is equal to s t to the power of 2. And then they said what? We needed to make b the subject of the formula. So to make b the subject of the formula, it becomes easy. You basically need to shift this a to the other side. And when you shift the a to the other side, it becomes a negative, where you'll be left with b is equal to st to the power of 2 minus a. So this becomes your final answer. Do we all understand?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's perfect. So you just need to know the basic rules that if ever they give you an equation and they're asking you to change the subject of the formula, if it is a fraction, even if it's going to have a square root x this one, you first need to get rid of the fraction and then the rest follows. Okay. Having said that, let us move to our 7th. On the 7th, we will have something like t is equal to square root of 2h over a. And then they say make h the subject of the formula. Any volunteer? How do we simplify this one? What is the first step that we do if we have something like this?
I think we first gonna get rid of the A.
Get rid of the A. Okay, how do we do that?
I think we gonna multiply both sides by a t by an a, and the square root of 2h.
All right, so which means this will cancel that, and then you'll be left with TA is equals to square root of 2h.
2h.
Okay, and then from there, we now follow our principle of a square if we have a square root, where we said if we are dealing with a square root, you would just power both sides by 2 to get rid of the square root. Said which these two will cancel that square root, and you have TA squared is equals to 2h. And then looking at our question, they said make h the subject of the formula. So if we are at this stage, what you simply do is you divide both sides by 2, where this 2 will cancel that one, and then you have h is equals to a t or ta squared over 2, or you can write it as h is equal to a squared plus t squared over 2. Do we have any questions? Do we have any questions?
No question.
Okay. If there are no questions, let us move to the 8th one. So on the 8th one, remember now they were giving you square roots. But what if they give you something like x squared is equals to y? And then they say make x subject of the formula. How do you simplify this?
Can I try this one? I think we're gonna put the square root both sides.
Put the square root on both sides.
Yes.
Okay. And then when you're square rooting, which means remember it's the same concept. If it's square root, you are canceling this power of 2 to that.
Yes.
Where you have something like x is equals to square root of y. So this becomes your final answer. And if they ask you, if they give it to you like x is equals to square root of y, and then they say make y the subject of the formula, you do the same thing. You square root both sides by 2. You square both sides by 2, where this 2 will cancel this, and then your final answer will be y is equals to x to the power of 2. So we are back at our equation. So this is your 8th equation of how to change the subject of the formula. As we can see from this, they are simply repeating the same thing and trying to say that do you understand the whole concept between if you are changing the subject of the formula and you have a fraction, or you have a square root, or you have a power to the power of 2. And then they are just checking if you know how to simplify those. Let us move to our last one. So our last one, we have something like a is equal to pi r squared over 4. And then they say make r subject to the formula. So from this, we can see that we have all the concepts that we need to solve this, which is rule number 1. If we have a fraction, we first get rid of the fraction. And how do we do that? We multiply both sides by 4 times 4. So you have 4a is equal to, this will cancel this. And then you have pi r squared. And then if you have this equation now, we need to be able to simplify to get to a point where we are only left with r. And how do you do that? You divide both sides by pi. So dividing both sides by pi, you are simply cancelling this pi, where you have r squared is equals to 4a over pi. And looking at this, our laws of square roots, how do we remove the two? Our laws of the square roots, how do we get rid of the two?
I think we're gonna put the square root both sides.
So put the square root both sides, at which the square root to cancel this, and then our final answer becomes r is equals to x square root 4a over pi. So this becomes your final answer. Are there any questions?
No question.
No question. All right. So these are basically the 9 ways that they are showing you how to find your subject with the formula. And if you can go to your BNU textbook, you'll see that there are different other exercises that they have. So on your own time, you can try to do those as your homework and to see if you have understood the whole concept. Where you have a question, you can always send a message and I will get back to you.